Then there is the question of, okay, now we know what's happening within the forest, but what about the chain? What about what happens with the paper making right through to the retail? And for that, you need to have the chain of custody certification. Again, important to ensure that you can communicate to your customers that the products that you have are environmentally responsible. It's important to have it for compliance with legislation. And we're now in the process of making absolutely sure that our due diligence system, or actually our chain of custody, becomes a due diligence system. So when it comes to dealing with the EU timber regulations or the RECE Act or indeed any other legality legislation, that by having your chain of custody, you are meeting the requirements there. So that's a question of us, or a process of us trying to add value to your processes so that you don't then have to develop ever-increasing numbers of operations and activities to satisfy increasing regulations, increasing needs globally. Risk management, of course, is very, very important, because if you have products, maybe not so much in the paper sector, but in other sectors, furniture, in many countries where certification is developing, there are issues of bonded labor. So we need to we were the first to bring in social requirements into the chain of custody to make sure, again, that the reputation of all of those that are using and have committed to sustainable forest management, and that also brings in the social element, that basically when it comes to the manufacturing side of things, that the reputation of the that your reputation, investments that you have made are secured, and that basically best practices even on the social front are taken into consideration when it comes to the manufacturing of products from sustainably managed forests. Traceability, of course, is important. And although we're now at a situation where about 40,000 chain of custodies are in play globally, it's only 40,000. There are a lot of businesses out there who are not yet certified, a lot of your customers and a lot of your suppliers who are not yet certified. And it's important to get more and more people certified so that you have the full assurances that you need for your customers. But you're still very much in a business leadership situation here if you are getting, or if you already have a chain of custody, or if you're persuading people to get chain of custody certification as well. It also allows you finally to give a clear and transparent message with the logo and the label on products to communicate to customers that the paper has been sourced responsibly. Other things being equal, would an eco-label influence your buying decision? Again, going back to the presentation which was made at the Planet Arc event. And the answer was that 52% said everything else being equal, they strongly agreed that an eco-label would influence the buying decision. And if you take somewhat and strongly together, you are at 78%. Maybe I'm just a simple forester, but I don't understand why that's not 100%. If everything else was equal, why wouldn't 100% of the public choose an eco-label? But the key message here is that the vast majority of people would have their buying decision influenced by an eco-label, everything else being equal. And that's something that's very, very important, because that is why it's important to label your products, and I encourage people to label products. And as we saw earlier on, the awareness of certification, the awareness of the differences between good paper and, inverted commas, bad paper, is people's awareness of labels. And as retailers have started to label all the product that they have got, the consumer awareness of that labeling has doubled. And it doesn't take many people to do that. It's interesting to see how the awareness of British consumers increased when, for example, the Royal Bank of Scotland decided that all its statements and all its envelopes would carry a PEFC label. Suddenly, the awareness of that label increased dramatically. And, say, 3 retailers in Germany caused a doubling of recognition. Now, PEFC itself, there is then also the question for you as companies about reliability and the reliability of the certification systems as such. And I want to say that this morning I was reading again on a huge furniture company. They were having some real difficulties on attacks which they were receiving on issues of high conservation value forests. And and all the suggestions of how they should now go back, and maybe the certification body should be audited again, maybe the international certification body should come in and have a look at the situation again, and so on. So it's important for you to know that certification systems have robust governance structures. So if somebody has a complaint, there is a clear mechanism on how that complaint will be dealt with. If there is an issue, no stakeholder group can have an undue influence on the certification decision, which must be taken on the facts and the facts alone. And from our point of view, that is why we have strictly separated standard setting, certification, and accreditation. When I arrived in Tasmania on Friday morning, the press was there and calling me the great investigator. I was expected to have a sort of Sherlock Holmes hat on and a pipe and maybe some magnifying glass to come and investigate the complaint that I had actually made against Forestry Tasmania based on a report by an academic who said that the forests weren't being sustainably managed. The fact that I could even make that request for an investigation is based on the strict separation that we have of the roles. I am the international person responsible for the international standard setting process. Then nationally, you have the national standard setting processes, and they use ISO requirements to progress that. And then when it comes to complaints procedures, again, we use the ISO processes where the certification body has to investigate the complaint first and make a decision. And we have to adhere to those rules and requirements the same as everybody else does. That gives you robustness. That means you don't have to have a policy which dissociates companies because certain stakeholders feel uncomfortable with a company being involved in forest certification. And it also gives you security to know that if you're using the certification system, you will be always judged on the facts and not on emotion. And it's a high time we took a lot of the emotion out of the debate and concentrated on the facts when it comes to forest certification. We're the world's only bottom-up certification system using national systems, and we don't have any interim standards or certification bodies that can fly in and certify something. I've sometimes been told, isn't that a disadvantage? Wouldn't you do so much more if you were able to do that? It's the value system that's important. We're actually trying to promote sustainable forest management in a wider range of countries, and the way to do that is to get stakeholders to actually develop national systems. Now, there's been a lot of work from the EU funding voluntary partnership agreements between governments where they bring stakeholders together, and it's much easier, and should be much easier, to take those multi-stakeholder dialogues already and to add forest certification standards on top of that than to just fly in a certification body and cherry-pick a few suppliers, leaving the others get involved in sustainable forest management and its recognition worldwide. We require all national standards to be independently developed with open participation of all interested parties, and we require consensus to be reached before a system can be endorsed by the PEFC Council. We recognize the importance of the 9 major groups as defined by Agenda 21, and the reason I point this one out is because I keep hearing criticism that, well, PEFC, you don't have a 3-chamber system. Well, I've had a look at some of the certification systems around the world, and actually there aren't many systems globally, whether it be in marine area or in organic agriculture or indeed in tea or any other areas that actually have a 3-chamber system. Having a 3-chamber system is like saying the only credible democracy is one where you have 1/3 of the votes to the left, 1/3 of the votes to the right, and 1/3 of the votes to the liberal, to the middle. And then the question is, well, what if there are other actors there? It's much better for people to be who they are, to represent themselves, and to have mechanisms in place, such as consensus, to ensure that you get the appropriate representation and the appropriate balance. And that's something that we feel very strongly with, and that's why we follow the UN approach of its understanding of what civil society is. All of our standards undergo public consultation at national and at international level and are assessed independently at international level. And we're the only system that requires that those standards are regularly implemented, not just at national level, but also at international level. So we ourselves at international level have undertaken 3 revisions since we've started, and we've got another one coming up in a few years' time.